Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Bulletproof For BJJ podcast. I am JT. I'm here with Joey, and we're going to do a podcast.
Right on, guys. Thanks for joining.
Fire up. It's a good one, this one, because people do talk about it a bit. It can be misunderstood. Hobbyist, are you in it for the fun or competitor? Did you come to win? Now,
this actually came through from one of our Instagram people. Like,
Okay.
have a chat about this.
yeah, because, I mean, it's one of those things that when you first start in jiu-jitsu, you don't necessarily know. You're like,
It
I'm
never
just doing
existed when we were early in the game.
No.
Right? There wasn't enough. Like most people that did jiu-jitsu, not most, but some people just did some competitions. Like
Yep.
you would just compete. But there was no sort of concept of professional jiu-jitsu or like I compete every weekend or...
No.
Was
there
there?
wasn't even enough competitions.
Nah.
Like at one stage in kind of Australian jiu-jitsu history, there's probably only two big competitions, which is like the Pan Packs and Nationals.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was state comps, but they're so small. Whereas now there's so many comps like Grappling Industries and you know, different federations setting up their own comps.
Grapple Mania over here.
They've got super
Subversion.
fights every other weekend.
Yeah, you can compete probably more like most of the weekends in the year if you want to.
If that's what you're after. But that's not what everyone has signed up for. So we were kind of going back and forth, and it was a classic conversation where Joe goes, well, save it for the podcast. I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to get clear here.
He dropped a couple of fucking bombs before we hit record.
But it's okay.
And you'll see he's going to drop and I'm going to be like,
He's faking. You can
that's
tell.
great, bro.
I'm so used to the fake laugh. It's because I'm funnier.
She
Hates it.
If I don't put the T on the end, Jules, YouTube doesn't pick up the profanity. Please proceed.
True. That's definitions, characteristics. What makes somebody a hobbyist versus a competitor? Because it may not be obvious. Like, let's define it.
Yeah, so when we're trying to figure that out, I'm like, hobbyist right here.
Bullshit.
JT doesn't, he's not confident.
Joe is not a hobbyist. Joe is an athlete who identifies as a hobbyist.
But if that's what I identify as, JT, who are you to say otherwise?
Look, pronouns like Joe wants to say hobbyist on his profile. That's fine.
Okay, so here's my reasoning.
It's not fair to normal hobbyists, dude.
No, sure, but I'm not a competitor.
No,
You can't put me in that bucket.
Okay, look, let's be clear. If I put on my profile hobbyist, that's not fair. Like
to who?
To people who are maybe only training once or twice a week and not doing much else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't know.
You're doing lots of other stuff, and you've had a competitive background. You're one of the more competitive people I know. So for you to be like, I'm just a retired assassin. I just sometimes.
Okay, fair. But so I get your point, but I guess what I'm thinking is like, by saying hobbyist, and I feel like with your thinking there that maybe it's like hobbyist is almost like a derogatory term, like you're just a hobby. And I know that when Hodge called you that, it cut deep, right? I know, but
that's
for me,
because
I'm like, hang on,
I have previously identified as a competitor,
right?
So
and that you can chop and change, right?
Right.
But I'm like, no, like there's some fucking savage hobbyists out there. But the reality is, like, I train because I enjoy it, and it's like I haven't competed for years. You know?
But I think this is why it's good for us to define this, because let's talk about training volume. That's one way, but that's only one lens. So let's say you train 2 to 3 times a week. That puts you more in the hobby section. That's like, I do this for fun. Because if you really want to get super good at jiu-jitsu and you want to be better than others, you're defining that for yourself. This isn't about competition. This is a standard. You're like, I'm going to push myself. I'm going to train 6 times a week, every chance I get. I'll do 2 a days. I'll do all this. This is a certain mentality, right? What that does cumulatively for your jiu-jitsu development is it accelerates it out of sight. The person who's training 6 times a week versus the person who's training 3, if you're able to keep that up, which is hard to do, contentious issue, you at the end of 12 months is way far ahead.
Yeah.
But we've also seen people who go super hard and then burn out too.
Yeah.
So training volume is one. We would say hobbyist does 2 to 3 times a week.
I'm actually going to push back because think of the hobbyists you know that are just on the mat all the time.
Okay.
All the time. But they're still not a competitor. It's not a sport for them. It's not, how do I, like, you know, it's not rule sets, point systems. It's just, I love this thing. I'm here all the time. Can't stop doing it.
Yeah, okay, there's that. But then I guess that's, okay, that, like I said, we got to look at it through more than one lens. So there's people who just don't compete. They don't enjoy it. That doesn't speak to them. They don't get a buzz from it. It doesn't, medals and all this kind of thing doesn't mean much to them. But on the mat, they're still competing. They don't want to lose. They still want to be the best.
Still tough, but still competitive.
You could still say that person is a competitor, even if they don't compete. That person who's trying to win every fucking role, that's not a competitor?
No, I think the way I look at it, no, like they're not engaging with the actual sport of jiu-jitsu, which is competition. They are competitive and they're tough roles, but they're not playing the game.
I think this is where we might disagree. I think if you've got someone who
God forbid,
who never competes,
this could be the last episode you guys ever hear from us.
Oh, unfortunately not, but here's how it goes. No, seriously, because I was having this chat just before with a brown belt, doesn't like competing, but he'll try and tap you every chance he gets. He'll try and beat you every fucking roll. He's trying to get better all the time. It's just he's got a certain mental approach around competition and, you know, for whatever reason, he's not into it. But that guy's a competitor. He's tough.
Well, I would say he's competitive, but a competitor is someone that's doing competitions.
All right. That's Joe's definition. All right. Cool. So what is another way that we can define hobbyist? And so you're saying it's...
Can you tell us a story about when Hodge called you a...
But why? Because people don't know?
People got to know the trauma.
No, it's okay. It's all right. Well, look, I was in the car one time.
Yeah.
I was doing... It was after a comp class at St Kilda, and I was actually giving Hodge a lift home because that's the kind of guy I am.
Ben Hodgkinson.
Ben Hodgkinson sandbagging Crionche.
He's repped Australia at ADCC twice? No, once.
Once, but is also just has been one of Australia's best heavyweights, but then also used to fight welter.
Consistently for a
and
long.
Possibly my number one adversary over many years. Anyway, we're mates now. It's all good. But we still try and kill each other every time we can. Every time we roll. He generally will get the better of me, but every now and again, if he is slipping, I'll find something mercilessly. We had some hard rolls. I think I might have won one round and he'd won two. We paired up for specifics, whatever. I felt pretty good off the training session. I gave him a lift home. And we were talking about competition and he was like, yeah, man. You know, I was like, look, you know, it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, I feel good in training. I'm not sure when I'll compete. And he goes, it doesn't matter. You're a hobbyist. I was like, oh, what? How dare you, Ben Hodgkinson? I train comp class every day of the week. I do the open mats. I do the lifting. I'm maybe more consistent than you. I'm just not in competition. He's like, well, you're not a competitor. I was like, oh, it was so hard for me to just accept. I'm getting choked up right now, man. It was just so hard for me to accept because I thought about it and I'm like, shit, I haven't competed in ages. And he was like, well, you're just not a competitor. And I'm like, I will always be a competitor. And that's the hardest thing, admittedly. Hadn't competed at black belt at all. Have not competed at black belt. And I thought about what I've been doing in my life and I'm like, I'm not a competitor anymore. But I am competitive. So this is a bit of a mental shift.
Something you grapple with, if you will.
Thank you, Joe. Excellent. I wish I'd come up with it. But for yourself, setting expectations is important, right? And this is the next thing I probably want to talk about relevant to when you think about your jiu-jitsu, are you just coming to have fun? Or are you coming to exercise demons?
Like, so say, you know, if we're taking... For a working definition, can we say that the competitor is the person that is actively entering competitions consistently? Then the hobbyist is anyone else.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Then to generalize, and we've got to say generalize because, you know, there's any and everything and, you know, whatever in terms of jiu-jitsu.
But variety.
How does what is the training, like how does the competitor approach training? Like how might that look different to how a hobbyist might approach it?
Well, so competitors are generally thinking about rule sets, and they're thinking about strategy, and they're thinking about how to win a role. But that's not necessarily the way to develop the best jiu-jitsu per se. It's just effective at winning a game. So, like for example, like going to turtle position in ADCC denies a person passing points, which means you can then, if you know how to play the game, you can effectively avoid getting passed by turtling as long as no one takes you back. That's a strategy. Is giving your back in the gi a good idea? Probably not. You know what I mean? Like it's very specific. In the same way, there was a gentleman, I won't name him, as a blue belt. He's very much on the berimbolo tip. He kept sweeping. I was watching him roll, and he wouldn't come up on the sweep. I'm like, afterwards, I kind of had a crack at him. And I said, dude, what are you doing? Like,
why don't you come up on the sweep, bruh?
Get your point. He's like, oh, but then I could be swept back. Well, just pass the fucking guard, bro, and do something with it. He's like, no, I'm waiting for the perfect opportunity to, get the crab ride and get the back take. And I'm like, yeah, but that might never happen. If you just keep half sweeping people, it was just incredibly annoying. So I would always smash him whenever I'd roll him to show him that his jiu-jitsu is very flawed. I'm vindictive like that. But long story short,
will remember your name.
He will remember my name. But no, I think ultimately it's your expectation is really important. So if you're coming in with a strategy, you're trying to work on a technique, you're trying to work on a game, that's very focused. And it also can be very selfish.
Yeah.
Because you don't care what the other person's doing really, as long as you get what you want.
That really, if you are a competitor, that kind of should be your focus primarily, shouldn't it?
To get really good.
Yeah.
Whereas I think someone who's coming in to just enjoy their jiu-jitsu, they actually don't mind.
Yeah.
Show up. Oh, what are we doing? Cross chokes. Mad. Oh, shit, I'm getting choked. Oh, yeah. What are you doing? Have a chat. Like it's the mental space is so different. And I think where people can get upset or maybe a misunderstanding or a misreading of a situation is someone comes in to have fun, someone comes in for war or for a competitive role, and it's not a clash, but it's just the expectations are totally different. So it is good for you to identify when you come into the class, I'm just coming in, no expectations, let's have a roll. Don't get mad when the competitor kicks your ass because they've been obsessing all day about the perfect way to you up. They've already trained twice that day and they've perfected
and they've been waiting for you to show back up for the last 5 days.
Yeah, they're like, I'm going to nail this guy. So I think it can go both ways.
Yeah.
One, if you are a competitive person, you are a competitor, and you have a specific idea in mind, and then your training partner doesn't kind of interact with you the way you want, they don't give you a hard roll or a good roll, don't be mad at them. Don't hate on them. That's not what they came for. In the same way, if you just showed up for fun and games and,
So I can, it's interesting thinking about jiu-jitsu. I know a few people, maybe who are like myself, whereby they're really tough rolls. They're hyper competitive, or not. They're very competitive.
Very competitive.
They take their strength conditioning extremely seriously, and some they take their technical development really seriously as well.
Sure,
but they never compete.
True,
right?
Yeah,
that's it's just an interesting thing because you've got those types, and then you've also got I can also think of really active competitors I know who, when they come into class, they're so intentional about what they're working on. That day they might be working on something very specific that you don't know what it is, and you'll pass their guard multiple times, take their back, blah, 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 and you'll be like, wow, I'm really doing well over so-and-so today.
Yeah.
But the reality is they just wanted to work on one specific thing, and the outcome of the role wasn't important to them.
Right.
And it's because it is easy to sort of make the assumption that, well, the competitors are always going to be trying to win every role.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time they are, but it's not necessarily the case, is it?
That's true. And look, competitors who are training multiple times in a day, they might have one really hard session that day, but the rest of the sessions are more technical development, maybe. So if it's their third session for the day and then you come in full of steam, I'm gonna smoke these fools, I gotta
big
really
bowl of acai about 30 minutes ago. I'm good to go.
Kill. And then they're just chill, and you're like, this guy isn't taking this role very seriously. Like, I'm here to bang, because that's your only session that week, or, you know, like.
Yeah, well, you only train 2 or 3 times.
It can go the other way, that you're compensating because that's all you got.
Yeah.
And that can lead to frustrating interactions, because the competitor's like, dude, why are you so serious? Like, you're not going to Worlds. Like, who cares? But for them, they're like, this is my Worlds.
You're like, I don't need to, bro. I just passed your guard. I basically won Worlds.
Bruh, give me your belt.
You do pretty good, so, you know. Tell me, bruh.
It is an interesting conundrum. And I think the reason why we're talking about it is pride does get in the way here. And people, I think probably it's like a lack of communication. I think it's good to actually say to someone 4-year-old, hey man, I'm just trying to.
You're a competitor or a hobbyist?
No, don't do that. how to really like, oh, what? Identity crisis. Yeah, it was that one time I won that in-house comp, and Adam gave me a pineapple. Yeah,
I mean,
right?
yeah.
I'm pineapple champion
I compete.
of summer 2019. All right, well, let's look at, because that's expectations, definitions, characteristics.
Just on that, like with jits, it's in a, correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm trying to think of trying to prove myself wrong. Jiu-Jitsu seems unique in that in the training room, you have one group of people generally, and some of them are competitors and some of them are not competitors.
Sure.
And they're all trained together.
Sometimes.
You get to bigger gyms that have like
class,
comp classes.
And you can have.
But even then,
intermediate.
in the comp class, like say, like in your example,
yeah,
you weren't there as a competitor. You were just there because that was the class that was
That's
the level
my
you were at.
Class, yeah.
Yeah. So in a way, like it's still, you'll get, whereas in other sports, I'm guessing, do you have specific training for the competition team? And then you have like.
I think in other sports, because they are sports, it is clearly defined.
Yeah.
We do a martial art that also has a sport.
That's a good point.
So this is where
like
it's
if
difficult.
you do soccer, like every Saturday you play a game.
Right. So look, if you're Division 13 all ages, I've played that. Shout out Emu Plains, Jamaica. Bo. You know, guys are showing up hungover, drinking on the side of the field, copping fines.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like you're not allowed to drink alcohol in this area. You know, it's one of those things. Whereas if you've played A-League or, you know, inside of that, you're not going to, you know what I mean? Like even when you're retired.
I don't want a sip of your drink. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
You can keep your VB long neck. I appreciate the offer. Maybe this is where we start to look at, because maybe someone is a martial artist and then someone is aspiring to be an athlete or sports person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even though someone could be very athletic, the idea of the martial art and self-improvement is more important than achievement. Is that how we could separate it maybe?
Yeah. That's definitely like a kind of parallel categorization.
So,
which we've spoken about in the past.
We have.
But you know, martial arts is like this journey. It encompasses the physical, spiritual development. You know, there's lineage and tradition tied into it. There's hierarchy. There's this whole thing. And then the sports side, the athlete, you're just there to win.
It's performance.
Yeah, and it's like belts. Like I'm just looking to get as good as I can at this game. Yeah. Two kind of different camps in a way.
Very different approaches, but there is times where they cross over.
Yeah.
And this can create friction and misunderstandings. So let's talk a little bit about time to belt. Like, how long does it take you to get a belt? Because when I first started jiu-jitsu, if you got your belt quicker, then you were better. You were just better. Like, that's just what it was. And I think at that time, Kit Dale was saying, oh man, I got my black belt in like 4 years. I was like, nah, like, whatever. I was a white belt when Kit was a white belt, and definitely Kit rocketed past me and did exceptionally well all the way up to probably brown belt internationally in competition. And, you know, he killed it. He did so well. But the truth is, if you look at someone like Lachlan Giles, who took 14 years to get that black belt, I got mine in 9.5 years. So decent amount of time. The average is about 10-ish. Some people longer. I don't think time to belt dictates quality of person. You know what I mean?
No.
But you do see those competitors who, like we were talking about, you say you're a bit on this, Joe, because you were saying it before.
Yeah, you definitely, there is a characteristic whereby the people who enter jiu-jitsu and are the competitor from the beginning and are like taken notes and assessing their game and reviewing, they're generally moving quite fast, and you'll see them sort of often pull ahead because they just are developing twice, 3 times as fast as the person who's not doing that stuff.
And there's something to competition which is like a real white hot light of what's working and what's not, because the intensity is so much higher.
Yeah.
And actually, so I got this advice from Kavaka, who was Kavaka was a world champion, won everything back in 2010. He was Marcus Bushesh's coach. He now runs Zenich, but a lot of people don't realize that Marcus Bushesh Almeida, his main coach was Kavaka. He learnt most of his game from him under, I believe, Checkmatch back in the day. But anyway, what I was going to say, he said to me, one competition is like 1 day of competition is worth 4 weeks of training. So
in terms of what you learn.
Yeah, just because of that technique didn't work. That sweep's not good enough. Oh, that really worked. Okay. So the learning loop is shortened up. Like it's accelerated. So I think actually, and I've said this a few times to students, that if you want to increase your learning, compete, even if you don't identify as a competitor. It just helps the learning.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like we've both competed more so at the, like I haven't competed at black belt, but competed at all the others. It was hugely important. And I would say there were periods there where I would have considered myself, yes, I'm a jiu-jitsu competitor.
Yes.
Just based on frequency and consistency and that kind of thing. But for the most part, most of those comps were kind of like, look, I wouldn't call myself a competitor. I'm just jumping in to see how I go. And it almost becomes an extension of the training.
But I think that's philosophical for you, Joe. I don't think that is reflective of your level or what you did.
No, not at all. But it's kind of
approach.
just an approach to it. Yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
So
I've won most of those comps.
True. Showing up, not giving a fuck.
I'll show you guys the medals.
But the time to belt thing, because a lot of people, when you are early, you do look at people who might go past you. Like, how come that guy's a blue belt?
Yeah.
I kick his ass all the time. What's going on with that? And this is the comparison piece, but what I wanted to say with this is, like, if I think about somebody, this is a bit of a meme. It's called Being Australian. And it said, like, Kit Dale was quite well known for a while, and then Craig Jones came. And so I think Classy Grappler made up this meme.
Right.
And he's saying, getting Australian. So Kit Dale was really good for quite a number of years and then didn't quite break through at black belt. And then Craig Jones kind of had a breakthrough. And then no one's talking about Kit, everyone's talking about Craig.
Yeah.
And then at the ADCC, Lockie came through. So Craig, Australian Kit, and Lockie, Australian Craig. Even though Craig got silver, everyone was talking about Lockie who got bronze. You know what I mean? It's this idea that, like, oh, that's harder than that. This guy's better than that guy. And it's different. It's just different, right? And so when you're thinking about how long it took you to get your belt, Lockie took the longest out of everyone to get his black belt. He started earlier and took longer. I think it took Craig only like 8 years or 7 years to get his black belt, right? Kit 5 or whatever he says, that doesn't matter. But when you're early and you see someone rocketing up the belts, you're like, dang, they must be fucking good. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. Like, quality of jiu-jitsu doesn't necessarily equal great competitor. It's great when it does, but I've trained with some jiu-jitsu guys who are really good at their A game. As soon as you get them out of their A game, they're kind of nowhere.
Yeah.
If they've never played close guard or they've never been put in bad positions, their game falls apart. So I think there's something to be said for someone who maybe takes their time and is more well-rounded versus someone who's got a really awesome A game and just rockets up competitively, but maybe they're lacking. You know, they're not quite as well-rounded.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So I think if you're out there and you're hearing this and you're like, well, I'm just trying to be good at jiu-jitsu. I don't have an A game. I don't even know what a fucking A game is. It's worthwhile to consider there's great value in having a well-rounded approach to understanding submissions, controls, escapes, passes. Like, that's okay. Like, the slow and steady is a good thing too. But different paths, right? Because unfortunately, or fortunately as the case may be, your coach will pair you up with someone. Joey, you go with Bean. Who's stronger?
Bean.
Right? And for me,
that guy.
For me, like I got paired with Hodgkinson a bunch. We hated each other at purple belt, and Lockie would always put us together because we're the same weight.
Like it's like, hey, let's get JT and Hodge.
Yeah, right. It's just
Everyone's
how it goes.
Woohoo!
And they knew, man, I nearly threw that guy out the front window of South Yarra a number of times. It's just how it goes with some of those roles. But everyone would have that where you have a counterpart where they're kind of either a little bit above you or like, it's not a race, but you got to gauge yourself off someone, right? Because you can't just do your jiu-jitsu in a vacuum by yourself unless you do solo drills. Let's talk about that, Joe, because it is different paths for somebody who is on the martial arts or the hobby tip and then the person who's just trying to win comps.
Yeah, the comparison thing, everyone talks about it. It's like it's the thief of all joy. It's what you don't want to do. Like, don't compare yourself to others. It's your journey. And that is absolutely the case. But the reality is we still always compare ourselves to people. And it's something you just got to learn to deal with. Make the comparison, assess, reflect on it, realize that, maybe that's not the most accurate thing to be comparing yourself to, but there is something to glean from it, of course, right? Yeah. The tricky part is when you're on one path with your jiu-jitsu, it means one thing to you, and then you are comparing yourself to someone that's on a different path. And I think that that's just problematic because you're comparing yourself to a different, like, it's not you, it's not reflective of you, and it's not, whereas...
But we wear the same belt, Joe.
That's right, yeah, right. Or we started together or whatever it is, right?
We're the same weight.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's not a bad thing to compare yourself to someone that is on the same path as you. You're like, oh, JT and I trained around the same amount, came up together.
Similar goals.
Okay, well, that's a more accurate comparison, right? Yeah, similar goals. So I think it's really important to be mindful of that when you're earlier on in this game, and arguably most of our listeners would be earlier, I would say. Everyone is kind of a bit more the same. But as you get further down the path, people start to pull away, right?
Yeah.
That some people will learn faster. Some people will train double as much as what you are. Some people train half as much. Some people take time off. Some won't. Some will start competing. Some won't. It really does start to diversify. Yeah.
And look, I had this conversation with Millet, and he's a black belt. We trained together at Peter DeBeans, but he is now under Lockie at Absolute. Good friend of mine, many years. One of the nicest guys. And we were at Mikhail's wedding, Mikhail and Mon, the other week.
Ultimate black belt wedding.
Yeah, bro. It was an all-star cast. It was
at your table there in the video you sent me?
Oh, man. So behind me was Mikhail and Mon, and across from him was Craig Jones, Adam Jones, and Tommy Baha. And then next to me is Lachlan Giles. And then next to him, it was pretty much all black belts. Just surrounded by jiu-jitsu.
It was the who's who of Victorian jiu-jitsu.
It was. And it was nice to connect with those guys because I spent so much time with all of them.
In a non-competitive environment for a change.
Well, actually, I did get 2 mentions in the wedding speech from the groom.
Yeah, right.
And it was so funny because I totally forgot. I don't know. I can't remember if I told this story, but you can get it a second time. I introduced Mikhail and Mon. I didn't remember doing that. I do remember meeting Mon on her first day, and I just remember going, oh, no one's talking to this person. I'll go include them. And she's like, yeah, I'm just really interested in jiu-jitsu. And Mikhail walked past. I was like, hey, Mikhail, this is Mon. He's like, yeah, all right, whatever. He just didn't really care. Just kind of probably just taking a selfie or something at that time. Anyway, they end up getting together, which is really nice. They're awesome people.
Beautiful.
But the interesting thing was the story of how Craig Jones and Mikhail became friends. They were actually commiserating over me being too intense. So I can't remember what competition it was. I have a very aggressive warm-up. I'll be listening to real high intensity drum and bass or electro and just be caffeinated, so caffeinated, and just be in my own zone and pretty much giving you the vibe, don't come near me when I warm up, you might get hurt.
Right.
It's dynamic. I'm just getting so G'd up and I want people to think I'm crazy. I want people to be like, what's this? What's going on there? And so Craig was posted up with Lachlan Warren. Lachlan Warren was also there.
Yeah.
Another great black belt under Lockie and trains in South Australia now. And they were posted up and they're like, fucking look at this fucking try hard. What's going on with this guy? And then Mikhail came up and...
you doing sprawls in your warm-up?
No, probably a few tuck jumps.
Right on.
Probably doing some Van Damme spinning kicks and just, breakdance routine. Anyway, Craig Jones gave like some snakes to, you're in the bullpen. And Mikhail's like, yo, some people just take themselves too seriously. Craig Jones was like, yeah, what an idiot. And they were talking about how dumb it is. And at this point, Mikhail goes, and we all know who has a very aggressive warm-up style, don't we? His name starts with a J and it ends in a T. And I was like, what? I looked across at Craig and Craig's like, yeah, dude, that's you. And I was like,
thanks for the mention, fam. Yeah.
You know it's me. You know what's up. So anyway, very funny.
Stood up, took the ovation. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Second time I've been mentioned in this speech. Most important person here, you know how it is. Anyway, long story short, I think the thing is that people have different paths, and you can look at this in competition as well. People have different approaches, and I have witnessed people be very intense about their jiu-jitsu, and that's them. And then some people be totally chill, just wake up from a nap and just do their thing. This applies to the hobbyist. This also applies to the competitor. At one stage, both Craig and I were competitive with each other. We're both competitors. He has a very laid-back style. I have a hyper-aggressive style. It's different for everyone in terms of how you function as a human, and knowing how you function is really important. And I've seen some people who are like slapping themselves on the face and smacking their hands and stuff in the gym, and they've got some of them are MMA fighters. So you're like, whoa, that guy's just training, dude.
Take it easy, Sean Strickland.
Yeah,
calm down. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, man, it's one of those things that I think if you identify, if you can clearly see the path and know that that person is doing something very different to you, even though you got the same belt, you all train together, it's okay. You shouldn't really try and think they're running their own race and you're running yours. Are you doing better than you were doing before? I think this is the number one question. And this is what Mile said to me, because after this conversation at the wedding, I said to Mile, bro, you gave me one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. I'd lost to Ben Hodgkinson at the Abu Dhabi trials. I'd just come back from Brazil. I'd beaten everybody. I beat Keller. I beat everybody. And then I lost on a decision in the final to Hodge. And I was shattered because I just thought, I can beat this guy. And Mile said, bro, you've come so far. Look at everyone you beat. He's like, you got silver, but how much better are you than a year ago? You're clearly better. So then you're doing the right thing, man. And that was one of the most insightful comments I'd had from someone. And Mile is such a nice, relaxed person. And he's almost like this kind of jiu-jitsu philosopher. He had forgotten he told me that. I'm trying to give him this really, give him a compliment. He's like, oh, I don't even remember that conversation. Whereas that was a really meaningful thing that he said to me. And I've always kept that if you're struggling because you're like, why aren't I getting the recognition? Why aren't I better than that guy? Are you better than you were 6 months ago, a year ago? If you are, in terms of your technique, your knowledge, your mistakes, you're on the right track. I think this is a really important thing to identify whether you're a competitor or not. It's just the self-improvement piece. So
yeah,
when you see different paths, Joe, how can you see people going forward without doing their own head in or kind of, hating on teammates?
I really think it's in that, what you just said. It's just recognizing that it's a different thing for different people, knowing what it is that you want to get out of it, and then reflecting on that, and if you, so if you are a competitor and you're finding yourself getting pumped up because you smashed, a couple of hobbyists this morning or whatever, it's like, okay, maybe, maybe I shouldn't be counting those scalps. Yeah. Attributing such value to those scalps. There's still some value there, but when you're rolling hard against your other, competition, mate, okay, now that's a thing, and vice versa. If you're someone that is just, I say is just a hobbyist, I don't think there's any, it's why I identify as, I don't think there's any negative connotation attached to that. It's just a perspective. You're not in it to be the best at competition. You're just in it because you like the thing. And maybe it's a tool for self-development, or maybe you just want to get your next belt or whatever it is. But yeah, just recognizing that, right? And that's, I think that's ultimately, that helps you to not burn up mental energy and sort of beat yourself up over silly comparisons.
Yes.
It just helps to calibrate things a little bit more so you can be like, okay, no, yeah, I am getting better. Or, oh, I'm not. Okay, well, what do I need to do? It keeps it objective and it keeps you kind of on a path of guiding this journey for yourself, really.
Yeah.
Like making it, you're not just like a passenger on this thing. It's you are steering this journey.
Yeah, I think the idea of ownership and agency, that if you're not where you want to be, regardless of the path, you can take control of that. You can find ways to improve regardless of whether you want to win a world title or you're just trying to work on your game.
Solid.
Nice.
Thanks for listening, guys. Catch you next one.
Peace.